What if I told you the gospel reached an entire nation, and not a single missionary was responsible for it? No boats carrying Western preachers. No foreign church sending its best men. Just a Korean diplomat, a Bible written in Chinese, and a moment of reading that changed the destiny of an entire people. That's where this story begins, and trust me, it only gets more extraordinary from here. South Korea today is one of the most Christian nations in Asia. Nearly 30% of its population identifies as Christian. It sends more missionaries around the world than almost any other country, second only to the United States. But the road to get here? It was paved with persecution, martyrdom, war, and one of the greatest revivals in the history of the Christian faith. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe. This is exactly the kind of story we tell on this channel, and there are 5 chapters ahead you won't want to miss. This isn't a story about religion spreading because it was convenient. This is a story about people who chose faith when it cost them everything, families torn apart, leaders executed, churches burned to the ground. And yet, the gospel not only survived, it exploded. The history of Christianity in South Korea is one of the most dramatic, emotional, and overlooked stories in all of Christian history. In this video, we're going to walk through every major era, from the very first seeds planted in the 1700s, all the way to the modern movement that is reshaping global missions today. 5 chapters, centuries of faith, and a beginning that nobody saw coming. Korea, 1784. The gates are closed, literally. The Joseon dynasty had ruled this peninsula for centuries with one clear rule: outsiders stay out. No foreign trade, no foreign ideas, definitely no foreign religion. Korea was known across Asia as the Hermit Kingdom. So how on earth did the gospel get in? Not through a ship, not through a Western preacher. It got in through a diplomat who went on a routine trip to China and came back a completely different man. His name was Yi Sung-hoon. He wasn't looking for God when he left. But in Beijing, between political meetings, he stumbled across Catholic missionaries and got his hands on a Bible in Chinese. He read it. Something broke open inside him. He got baptized before he even made it home. Yi Sung-hoon walked back into one of the most religiously controlled kingdoms in Asia, carrying a faith his own government would eventually declare punishable by death. No church backing him. No support network. Just a man who read something that changed everything and couldn't pretend he hadn't. He started gathering people, quietly, in homes, in secret. A real, functioning Christian community took root in Korea before a single missionary ever set foot on Korean soil. The spread of Christianity here didn't start with mission strategy. It started with literacy and courage. But the government noticed. Between 1791 and 1866, the Joseon rulers launched wave after wave of persecution. Thousands were arrested. Hundreds were publicly executed. Families were torn apart for refusing to burn incense before Confucian ancestral tablets. The message was clear: choose your king or choose your God. Most of them chose God. And then there's Andrew Kim Taegan. You need to know this name. Born into a family already marked by persecution, Andrew crossed thousands of miles in secret, trained as a priest, and in 1845 became the first native Korean Catholic priest in history. Then he smuggled himself back into the country that had already killed his father for the same faith. He lasted 1 year before they caught him. He was 25 years old when they beheaded him. His last words were a prayer for the very people executing him. In 1984, Pope John Paul II canonized him as a saint on Korean soil in front of over 1 million people. The Christian faith in Korea was never imported. It was chosen violently, deliberately, at enormous personal cost by Korean people who read a book and decided it was true. By the time the first Protestant missionaries arrived in the 1880s, they weren't planting a church from scratch. They were walking into soil already soaked with decades of prayer and the blood of thousands of martyrs. By the 1880s, the walls of the Hermit Kingdom were starting to crack, and when they opened, the missionaries walked in. But not the way you might imagine. Horace Newton Allen arrived in 1884 as a doctor first, minister second. He treated a wounded Korean nobleman, earned the trust of the royal court, and quietly opened the door for what was coming. Then came Horace Underwood and Henry Appenzeller, arriving on the same boat in 1885 on Easter Sunday. One Presbyterian, one Methodist. 2 men stepping into a country on the edge of transformation. Korea in the late 1800s wasn't just religiously closed, it was politically terrified. Japan was circling, China was pulling strings. The ordinary Korean had no voice, no dignity, no future. And then someone handed them a Bible in their own language. Underwood and his colleagues didn't just preach, they translated. They built schools, opened hospitals, created a printing press. For the first time, common people, including women, were being educated and told that their lives had value before God. Christianity wasn't arriving as a Western import. It was arriving as liberation. Korean converts didn't just attend church, they memorized scripture, evangelized their neighbors, funded their own buildings. By 1907, that hunger exploded into something historic. In Pyongyang, a revival broke out that shook the entire peninsula. Thousands gathered, wept, confessed publicly, reconciled with enemies. It became known as the Pyongyang Revival, Korea's own Pentecost. But just as the church was catching fire, the political situation was turning to ash. In 1910, Japan annexed the peninsula outright. Korea ceased to exist as an independent nation, and the Japanese Empire had very specific plans for a people who bowed their knees to a god that wasn't the emperor. Japan didn't just occupy Korea, they tried to erase it. Language banned in schools, history rewritten, names replaced by Japanese ones. Shinto shrines were built across the country, and Koreans were required to bow before them as an act of loyalty. For Korean Christians, it was an impossible choice. Bow and deny your faith, or refuse and risk everything. Then came March 1st, 1919. Across the country, Koreans took to the streets in a massive peaceful protest against Japanese rule. The Samil Movement. 33 leaders signed the Korean Declaration of Independence. 16 were Christians. In a country where Christians were less than 2% of the population, they represented nearly half the movement's leadership. The Christian faith had become inseparable from Korean national identity. The Japanese response was brutal. Thousands arrested, hundreds killed, villages burned. In the village of Jimri, soldiers locked Christians inside a church during worship, barricaded the doors, and set it on fire. Every person inside died. They died singing. Through the 1930s and into World War II, pressure on the church became unbearable. Some denominations officially complied with shrine worship, one of the most painful fractures in Korean Christian history. But not everyone broke. Pastor Jugi Cheol stood before his congregation in 1938 and refused, publicly, knowing exactly what it would cost him. He was arrested, imprisoned, and tortured for years. He never recanted. He died in prison in 1944, 1 year before liberation, his body broken, his faith untouched. Japan fell in 1945. Korea was liberated. But the worst wasn't over. The peninsula was split along the 38th parallel. The Soviet Union in the north, the United States in the south. In the north, Kim Il-sung's regime moved fast. Churches shut down, pastors arrested. Pyongyang, once called the Jerusalem of the East, became one of the most anti-Christian cities on earth almost overnight. Then on June 25, 1950, the Korean War began. 3 years of war, 4 million dead, cities reduced to rubble, families split across a border they would never cross again. For the Korean church, the war was catastrophic, and strangely, the moment everything changed. Because when you lose everything, sometimes the only thing left is God. In 1945, there were roughly 300,000 Christians in South Korea. By 1980, that number had exploded to nearly 8 million. David Yonggi Cho started his ministry in 1958 in a tent in one of Seoul's poorest neighborhoods. No money, no building, no congregation. The Yoido Full Gospel Church grew into the largest single congregation in the history of Christianity. At its peak, over 800,000 members. But the growth wasn't just happening in megachurches. It was happening in living rooms, mountain prayer retreats, 4 a.m. prayer meetings before the sun came up. Korean Christian culture developed a ferocity of prayer that became its trademark. All-night vigils, fasting, crying out to God on mountainsides in the dark. This wasn't performance. This was desperation turned into devotion. A nation colonized, divided, and bombed into poverty found in the church, not just spiritual hope, but practical community. Faith and survival became the same thing. Nobody saw this coming. A country evangelized less than 200 years ago, still pulling itself from the rubble of war, became the second largest sender of Christian missionaries on the planet. By the 2000s, South Korea had over 20,000 missionaries deployed across more than 160 countries, going to places Western missionaries couldn't. Central Asia, the Middle East, North Africa. They understood suffering. They weren't coming from comfort. Their grandparents had done it. Their history was built on it. In 2007, a group of 23 South Korean missionaries were kidnapped by the Taliban in Afghanistan. 2 were executed. Inside the Korean church, alongside grief and controversy, there was a recognition. This was the cost their ancestors had always paid. The line from Andrew Kim Tegan, beheaded at 25, to those missionaries in an Afghan desert was a straight one. But by the 2000s, cracks were showing. Megachurches became institutions. Institutions became businesses. Pastoral dynasties emerged. Scandals surfaced. Financial corruption. Abuse of power. The younger generation noticed and started leaving. Today, Christianity claims roughly 28% of South Korea's population, but surveys show a steep decline among people under 40. Disillusioned, asking whether the church their grandparents died for still resembles anything those grandparents would recognize. It's a tension Christian history has seen before. In every great movement that outlives its founding fire. The question is never whether the fire went out. The question is whether the next generation is willing to light it again. And if history is any guide, in Korea, they usually do. Because here's what 240 years of Christianity in South Korea actually tells us. This faith was never dependent on perfect institutions. It survived without missionaries. It survived persecution and martyrdom. It survived colonization and war. Every single time the church in Korea looked finished, it came back, different, scarred, but alive. The story isn't over. It's just in its next chapter, and nobody has ever been able to write the ending for the Korean church, except the Korean church itself. So let's bring it all the way back. It started with one man. No mission organization, no foreign church, no strategy meeting. Just Yu Sung-hoon, a Bible written in Chinese, and a boat ride home that changed the course of an entire nation. From that single moment, everything you just watched unfold was set in motion. The martyrs who died singing. The missionaries who arrived on Easter Sunday. The pastor who refused to bow and died in prison for it. The tent church that became the largest congregation in human history. The missionaries who walked into Taliban territory because their grandparents had taught them that faith was worth the cost. This is what Christian history looks like when it's real. Not clean, not comfortable, not convenient, but unbreakable. Here's what I want you to sit with after this video. The Korean church didn't grow because conditions were perfect. It grew because ordinary people, farmers, diplomats, students, mothers, pastors, decided that what they believed was worth more than what it cost them. Every era we walked through today, the pressure was immense. And every single time, the faith came out the other side stronger than it went in. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. And patterns tell you something true. If this story moved you, if it surprised you, challenged you, made you think differently about the spread of Christianity and what it actually costs, then this channel is exactly where you need to be. Subscribe right now. Every week, we go deep into the stories of how the Christian faith spread across the world. The real stories. The ones that don't make it into textbooks. You don't want to miss what's coming next. We're not done with Asia. We're not done with the untold eras of Christian origins in places you've never considered. The next video is already being built. And if you thought South Korea was surprising, just wait. The trail doesn't end here. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And we'll see you in the next episode. God bless.